Well, it is the 19th of September 2023, 5 days after the Energy, Petroleum and Regulatory Authority placed the fuel pump at an all-time high of 211. 5 days later, what are the effects? We're trying to look into that particular matter this particular morning. Welcome to the show. This is News Check. I am your host, Abdiaziz Hashim, and I'll be having a panel this particular morning to be discussing around the matter of the cost of living. Has it been exacerbated by the increase of fuel prices in the country? Petrol now retailing at 211. And will the government-to-government oil exportation and importation try to salvage this particular matter? Now, let me just give you a little bit of statistics before I tell you what we have in store for you this morning. Is that the latest InfoTrack polls placed 85 Kenyans concerned about the high cost of living and urgently requiring the government to at least address this particular matter. Now, last year it was placed at 72, 13% of Kenyans arguing it is at all-time high. Now, the 72% of Kenyans were concerned last year, but the matter has been exacerbated to the extent 85% of Kenyans right now are saying that the government requires to at least address this particular matter. On the other side of TIFA, placed it at 58% of Kenyans, the respondents saying that the cost of living 1 year later on has not been reduced. But in that particular report, interestingly, is that 37% will say that the reduction of the cost of living compared to the 29% who are of the opinion that the government will deliver on job creation. You do remember this was among the key pillars President William Ruto assured Kenyans that he will deliver on. That is what we're centering our conversation. You can also join us at Abdiaziz Hashim at KBC Channel 1. What do you think about the cost of living and what should be done this particular morning? Who will be joining me this particular morning will be Arnold Maliba, a public policy analyst. Arnold, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. And of course, we'll be conversing with him in just a bit. But let me tell you our itinerary this particular morning. We do have our various reporters stationed in various parts of the country. I do understand our senior reporter from Kisumu, Chola Simon, will be chiming in into this particular conversation from the Lakeside City. We also have a function that will be carried on by His Excellency, the Governor of Nairobi, Johnson Sakaja, on the school feeding program at Olympic Primary in Kibera. And of course, we have our reporter stationed there. The other part is on the sports edition, where the Ministry of Youth and the Arts and Sport invites the media on the stadium handover of the refurbishment of the development part of the East Africa Pamoja and preparation. We saw the Cabinet Secretary a little bit earlier on in terms of the Talanta Hela. We also do understand that the clergy will be addressing members of the Fourth Estate in regards to the recent ruling by the Supreme Court on the LGBTQ matter. And then finally, just adjacent to the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation here at Norfolk, it will be the African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption. Kenya chapter opposes proposed amendments to the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act of 2023. We have our reporter Kasichana Masha, and she'll duly inform us in the next few minutes. But I want to start this particular conversation with Arnold Maliba, a public policy analyst. Arnold, welcome once more to the show. You do understand that the cost of living has been a matter up for discussion for the last few years in this particular country. It is not a new norm, as you're well aware, but to the extent that it has reached to where it is now. Last year, InfoTrack placed it at 72. Right now, 85% of Kenyans are concerned about the high cost of living. Is there a cause for concern?
There's definitely cause for concern because there are two things here. We're talking about well-being, individual well-being as a people, and then of course financial stability. So the cost of living is a function, or rather is a product of very many functions.
Yes.
First of all, there's the issue of inflation. That is a subject that we'll talk about on its own. Of course, there's the issue of unemployment and underemployment. Yeah. Then, of course, there's the housing bit of it. It's quite a list of so many things. But normally when we talk about the cost of living in this country, a lot of times we rush to only talk about two things, food and fuel.
Yes.
Even though fuel contributes quite has immensely to literally everything else, but it's important to look at this. There's inflation, there's unemployment or employment status, how people are getting their income, there's the place of housing, then of course the energy costs, how we get energy, whether it's fuel or whatever it is, because we also have got other alternative sources to energy. We'll be talking about that later on. Of course, then now the biggest one is food prices, because there's the joke that do we live to eat or do we eat to live? Then of course there are two others that they take a backseat when we talk about the cost of living. The place of education. When we talk about cost of living, education should be part and parcel of it, because it is a primary need. And then finally health. So we normally start with health, we normally start with food, then energy, and that is where it stops. But then there's so much to actually talk about. So at the moment, of course, what is driving this particular conversation is fuel. About 50% of what we normally pay for fuel is taxes and levies. But then there's need to also explain why we have got those levies on that. When I was young, my father would pay road licenses separately, fuel levies. When we were young, because I was born in the 80s, I remember my father paying for his car different licenses. So you will find a lot of stickers at the windshield. Today, we've tried to ensure that out of efficiency and to actually ensure that there is equity. Because if all of us are going to pay for road usage license, for example, because at the end of the day, we have to maintain our roads, the usability and stuff, to ensure that the infrastructure is also working. Because again, if it doesn't work, it brings in inefficiency that will also reflect on the cost of living still. So all that list, when you're talking about road maintenance levy and anti-adulteration, all that, there are about 6-7 of them. Whatever they are, the wisdom was that if we take care of them at the fuel level, it brings in equity. So that then all of us are not paying equally. So whoever uses more pays more of it, as opposed to the days of old where it was uniform. Like if you have got a smaller car, then we charge all of you. So even if you're not going to use your car for 2-3 months to go so far, you still pay the same as that particular person who travels frequently, which wasn't so much a function of equity. So there's too much to talk about that. Then there's the international part of it that we've really taken time to talk about. Of course, first of all, we are talking about the fluctuating international prices for fuel. Of course, there is the argument about it's not changed. It's only been there for about, it's only gone up for about 5%. But then the cost of fuel cannot be solely pegged to the cost of crude oil, because there's the part on refining. There's the part on storage, and then there's the part on transportation. All those contribute to the eventual price. But we are stuck between the rock and a hard place, because I know as a country we want to be progressive. We are talking about green energy, we're talking about climate change. Those are things that Kenya is actually big on. But you see, the green energy sector is very expensive. That's one thing people don't talk about. I've also seen people throw in proposals about why can't we use our own fuel. We have got oil in the Turkana oil, for example. The cost of actually operationalizing that is so high, and you are not able, for example, to actually put that as a solution for short term, because Kenyans are looking for solutions now. They're not looking at solutions 5-10 years to come. Uganda, for example, discovered oil before us. 20 years ago, Uganda discovered oil. Up to now, they've not really operationalized it. It's not that easy. Tanzania has got quite substantive gas. You don't see that very much reflect, because some of these things, so someone is going to rush to Libya and say, okay, the cost of fuel in Libya is way lower than ours, and they are having a situation of war. What you forget is that Libya has actually been doing a lot of, has been in this business much longer. So there is an infrastructure that actually exists. They are a big oil supplier. So there's so much to talk about when it comes to the cost of living. But I need to flip it to probably a territory that we've been lazy to talk about. Talking about the cost of fuel, we cannot limit it to a function of revenue or the need for revenue, because again, I've seen a push and a conversation around the government is so much interested in revenue. You know, revenue, taxes and levies are actually a response to our economic planning. we need, if we're going to rethink the tax regime, we are going to rethink the revenue structure and everything around that, there is one thing that we must talk about. We need to rethink our economic planning function. That architecture really needs to be thought about, because taxes, people in parliament will only do taxes based on the demands that we put on the table, what we want to spend. So even as we speak about austerity and other measures, we still need to rethink completely how our economic planning outlook really is going to take care of our interests. Because again, these things are going to be there. There might be not so much big change, but taxes are there for specific reasons. You are talking about NTSA, you're going to talk about KENHA, KERA, and everything else. They are funded by these particular taxes and levies.
Yes.
So even as we rush, the only thing that has actually changed today on fuel are actually two things. VAT, and then we did away with the subsidy. So on the subsidy, we simply were funding that by way of debt.
Yes.
Then, of course, for VAT, this is a conversation people don't want to have. Also, we are not very bold to actually
But on
have
the subsidy, before you go to the VAT, was it wise on the part of the government to remove the subsidy?
The thinking, and you know, for policymakers, especially the people in government, the thinking was, we are spending what we don't have. By then, by the time they came in, we actually had accrued 65 billion shillings in debt to just subsidize fuel. So the thinking was that we can actually allow it to go and run its own course and stabilize. Again, there is one thing that we're also not talking about. One of the issues that actually are making these things go so high is that, of course, we are a net importer of oil, and the dollar, we don't trade, we don't buy oil in our own currency. So there's been the dollar inflation going on, and that is something that on our end, since we are number one, a net importer, number two, we don't export much. We really have turned our country into a merchandise country. We are not doing a lot of production. All the factories that we had, we turned them into godowns. So we are only bringing in things. We are a nation that is in love with consumption. So how then are we going to have a say or even influence the forex? And the forex determines how we buy fuel, because we are not buying it in the Kenyan shilling. So there is a multiplicity of factors and issues that are actually bringing us here on oil alone or on fuel alone. So that's why I would love us to actually have a deeper, if there is any national dialogue that we really need, we need a national dialogue on our economic planning posture. We really need to rethink the way we actually are going to plan and how we are going to model this country. Otherwise, if we become piecemeal, and let's talk about now that fuel has gone up, let's talk about that. And then after that, we're only talking about taxes. And then our parliament being quite reactionary, you will actually see them going to parliament and then guys come up and talk about these taxes are endless, there are so many. What were they responding to? So this is the time I think that we need to have a proper conversation, and it's one of those reasons, by the way, and this is so unrelated, I always think we need to do away with CDF, because CDF has taken away the minds of our parliamentarians, because parliament now is not a late endorser to budget making. Parliament is a budget making body. Function number 4 for parliament is actually making budget. But these guys are busy with CDF in the villages. They are no longer people who are supposed to do what they're supposed to be doing. So it's a bigger thing. But then we, as a nation, I don't think probably we are ready to have this particular conversation. It will be easy to point fingers and run away with populist statements, and that's where it stops. Joining us is Dr. Isaac Hassan, a political and governance expert. Isaac, Dr. I'll be coming to you in a few, but let's head over. I do understand that we have a function that is ongoing there at Norfolk. I do understand that the African Parliamentarians Network Against the Corruption Kenya chapter proposed to the amendments to the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act of 2003. Let's get to listen what is happening there in matters to do with this particular act of 2003.
Skills that were given and were taught. When you give them a budget to look through, they'll read through and they'll just ferret out. They'll tell you this and this looks like is not adding up. Fraud detection. So my only prayer would be, as we fight on this front of making sure that the EACC, as it is not undermined, I personally believe that the nuclear bomb is the police. if we can get the police on our side, if we can get the police to see what we are seeing, and they have the obligation to do that. If you look at Article 245, if you look at the Police Act, if you look at Article 238 on national security, all these things come down to say that the real actor, the real law enforcer, we should really focus on to tap the skills and the investments Kenyans have put there in the National Police Service, and let us see how do we mainstream the OCS in the fight against corruption. Keeping those OCS on the periphery is hurting this war. Let people be treated as thieves, not corrupt. Even the word corrupt mischaracterizes a very bad crime. Corruption looks something sexy, something desirable, but theft is not. Let us not make the mistake we have been making in the upper side, where they say cattle rustling is a cultural activity. If only we could call it robbery with violence and say the police go after this guy is robbery with violence, maybe the change would come. We have seen what Museveni did with the cattle rustling among the Karamoja in the north. He did exactly that. He called it a crime. And even went further and said that anybody carrying a gun is a military man, and so if you are arrested, you are taken to a court-martial, not to a civilian court. And he engaged them with helicopter gunships. And the thing went down. But here we call it a cultural activity. People are being robbed of their cattle, people are being killed. We have refused to call it robbery with violence. And we are unable to deploy the forces, the power, the monopoly of the state in violence that goes against robbers and those who are violent. So let us really, really think of how do we move away from the idea of mischaracterizing this theft from the public through this anti-corruption crusades and whatever, and call thieves by their name and put the OCS at the center and the police station at the center of these issues. Thank you very much for those few remarks, and may God bless us all.
Well, that was Busia Senator Okiya Omtatah expounding on a roundtable media briefing that they are having from Parliament and other stakeholders like the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission on matters to do with the Vice and the proposed amendments to the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act of 2003. The senator saying that corrupt individuals should just be called thieves and EACC should not hide away in exposing them and dealing with them ferociously. If you're just joining us, we're discussing on matters to do with the cost of living. We've just expounded more with our guest this particular morning, Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, and joining us this morning as well is Dr. Isaac Hassan, a political and governance expert. You can also chime in into the conversation through our social media at KBC Channel 1, at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. Now let me rope in Daktari. Daktari, when you just walked in, we were talking about the importation of government to government for fuel or crude oil. Will that even make a dent in dealing with the cost of living?
Thank you very much, Abdiaziz. Thank you, my colleague who is part of the panelists. Mm-hmm. Of course, KBC Channel 1 is the channel to be. Mm-hmm. Yes, a number of issues have been trending the past 1 week in regards to cost of living versus the increase in the cost of fuel, or rather fuel prices. We know very well the cost of living has remained constant in terms of spiking high from the time issues regarded to global inflation began. And when the government initiated the process of government-to-government purchase of fuel in the country, in the onset of Kenya Kwanza government in office, we felt it was something that perhaps will be very much helpful and significant to the common mwananchi who are facing the challenge in terms of that cost of living being very high. One way or another, I think it was not possible to sustain that momentum, and fuel costs continued rising. And recently the fuel cost reached up to 211.6 shillings per litre for petrol. And you know very well, if fuel increases, or rather the cost of fuel is increased, a lot of things also increases that affects directly a common mwananchi in terms of issues that are used in day-to-day life. For example, commodities within supermarkets, commodities within the groceries, commodities within the farms or farm produces, all those increases, the fact that they are linked to fuel consumption, of course the utilization of fuel. You may see soon electricity cost increasing as well. But since the first time that they have engaged government to government in terms of the fuel supply for this country, we expected the decline in fuel production, or rather supplies. But it looks like this is not a good solution. Perhaps it was not given a very good thought in terms of the implication of whether this will going to change the scenario where we always have our fuel pumps increasing every other month. Now, yesterday, I'm sure you have seen in many of the media, the government again engaged the fuel producers, but they have reduced a component. They have agreed and negotiated on a component where the premium cost as well as transportation from the side of the supplier being reduced or being waived. And we are hoping if that particular aspect of arrangement is agreed upon by each and every person, and we see the fuel supply in the next 1 month reducing to a manageable level, then I think by then we may think of cost of living being either sustained that way it is, or probably getting reduced from that point. But generally, government to government gives you a very strict conditioning where you are not given a window to do your market fluctuation game. And business usually is good when it is free, what they call free open market. And that is when people are likely to either sell to you at a price that is reasonable or sometimes exorbitantly sell you at a price that is not logical or reasonable. But again, the fuel control is a very good idea. The government initiative in controlling the fuel pump prices was something that, regulating that prices was something that we thought it will bring sanity. But when you see every other month there is increase in the fuel pump, then we think buying or rather selling fuel from one pump to another is difficult. I think one thing that I will have suggested is that our government should be considerate to the people of Kenya who are very much suppressed at the moment and reduce a bit of tax from the fuel pump so that we are able to manage the cost of living until the stabilization is realized.
Maliba, I'll be coming to you. I do understand that we have, given that we told you and promised you that we'll be conversing with you, dear Kenyans, I do understand our senior reporter, Achola Simon, is in Kisumu City, at the Lakeside City. Achola, good morning, and if you can hear me, what are the residents of the Lakeside City saying about the ever-rising cost of living that we're currently conversing here in the studios?
Well, good morning, Aziz Abdi there in Broadcasting House. We are coming to you live from Kisumu County, as you've rightly put it, where I'm actually standing right now is at the main bus terminus in Kisumu County, right in the CBD. And of course, it is here where we are going to get the views of Kenyans on exactly what they feel about the increment on fuel, and of course, what impact it has had on their normal life and, more importantly, business. Remember, just my colleague can actually show, this is a normal working area for many Kenyans. Each and every one of them, of course, are going about their activities regardless. That resilient spirit of Kenyans who will go an extra mile regardless of the circumstances to ensure that indeed they go about their activities, and of course they ache an honest living at the close of each and every day. And of course this is replicated across the country, of course, just people going about their businesses. But more importantly, going back to what we're supposed to be discussing, Hashim, is the fact that already the pinch of that increment of fuel increment is actually being felt. I'll just run you through some of the fare increments that have already experienced here in Kisumu. For instance, initially just going from Kisumu here to Migori was about 600 shillings. As we speak right now, the fare has actually hiked to 800 shillings. From here to Busia, it was around 450 shillings. But as we speak right now, the fare has already hiked to about 600. And of course, that is also replicated on many routes, of course, emanating from here to Kisumu to the final destinations. And also the other group that has actually complained about the increase and was expected actually to do so is the Boda Boda riders, who are here with me, and of course they'll be telling us exactly what this increment on fuel exactly means on their business and their general stay here in Kisumu. Ndugu, habari gani? Naomba kwanza ujitambulishe jina lako na kisha baadaye tuongee kidogo kuhusiana na hali ya maisha.
Kwa majina muita Naftali Inda Wanguche, mfanyikazi wa bodaboda mjini Kisumu.
Naftali, hebu nieleze tu kama mfanyikazi wa bodaboda, tumeona kwamba mafuta tayari imeongezwa kwa shilingi kadhaa, si ndio? Nataka kujua wewe kwanza kama mfanyikazi wa bodaboda, hii imekuathiri vipi?
Imeniathiri sana kwa sababu sisi sekta yetu hii hatuwezi ongeza fare na ile hali mafuta imeshaongeza, abiria wenyewe tunabeba wanakataa. Mimi maoni yangu ingeenda kwa serikali yetu ya Kenya. Tafadhali, serikali yetu tukufu ambayo tulipigia kura, tunaiomba tu ituondolee levies ambayo inachukua kwa mafuta ikiingia nchini Kenya. Iliongeza kutoka 8% imefikisha 16%. Sasa tunaomba hizi levies zingine 9, serikali iko na uwezo wa kutusaidia na ituondolee kabisa na tuweze kupata nafuu, tuendelee na maisha yetu ya kawaida.
Wewe kama mhudumu wa bodaboda, na iwapo bei ya mafuta itazidi kuongezeka kila uchao, basi hali yako ya biashara itakuwa vipi?
Kama hapa Kisumu itabidi wengine tutarudi mashambani kwa sababu sasa hatuna njia nyingine. Itabidi turudi mashambani kwa sababu kazi sasa itakuwa kuna abiria wengi wanatembea kwa miguu, wale wanaenda mbali pia hawana pesa, wanalia. Sasa itakuwa ni ngumu.
Kwa kawaida wewe unaenda nyumbani na pesa ngapi, na tangu waongeze bei ya mafuta imeathiri vipi mapato yako ya siku?
Ongezeko la mafuta limeniathiri kabisa. Siwezi sema ati saizi nasikia nafuu. Nilikuwa naweka lita 2 kwenda, mimi ni mzaliwa Kakamega. Nilikuwa naweka lita 2 na nipeleka Kakamega kwenda na kurudi. Saizi inabidi niweke lita 4 ambayo ni shilingi 800 ambayo sitaweza kuafford hiyo mafuta. Yes.
Asante sana Naftali. Hashim, if you allow me, I'll also just have an opportunity to talk to another rider who is actually here, so that then he can actually also give us his perspective on exactly what is happening. Kindly just introduce yourself.
Yeah, mimi naitwa Felix Omono.
Felix, hali ya ongezeko ya mafuta ya kutumia kwa pikipiki, mafuta ya kupika, inakuathiri vipi kama mkazi wa Kisumu na mhudumu wa bodaboda?
Imetuathiri sana juu sasa by then tulikuwa tukitumia mafuta vizuri sana. Tulikuwa tunapata kwa siku hata kama ilikuwa juu, lakini tulikuwa tumesazoea na venye ongeza. Sasa venye inaongezwa na bado inaongezwa tena. Sasa hii imetuathiri sana juu tulikuwa tunaenda, mimi nilikuwa naenda nyumbani na si hata lita 2, lakini sasa hizi inabidi niweke lita 4 ama lita 3 ndio niende, lakini sasa hiyo sijaweka ya kurudi.
Yeah. Hii inamaanisha vipi kwa hali ya jumla ya maisha yako sasa?
Tumeumia sana. Tumeumia sana sababu mimi sasa hizi hata kutuma pesa nyumbani aje watoto wangu wanaweza kula siwezi. Juu nikilipa pikipiki sasa hizi tuko kwa pikipiki ya loans. Tunakulipa pikipiki peke yake inakuwa ni shida sana. Juu hata wanataka tulipe pikipiki, tunataka kuweka fuel, tunataka kufundisha watoto nyumbani kwa shule, tunataka kulipa nyumba, inakuwa ni shida sana. Juu kupata hiyo pesa tena sasa
Pengine tutafanya vipi ndio tuweze kujiondoa katika hali ambayo tukongetaka rais na serikali ya Kenya iweze kufanya nini ndipo basi tuweze kujiondoa katika hii hali ambayo tuko?
Kusema ukweli ndugu yangu, serikali yetu, ndugu yetu William Ruto, yeye ndiye alitoa promise atasaidia hustlers, lakini tangu aingie kwa presidential, kwa kweli ya Mungu hajatusaidia. Kwa kweli ya Mungu hajatusaidia.
Pengine azingatie masuala gani kuhakikisha kwamba maisha inaanza kwenda?
Ningeomba tafadhali, ningeomba sana apunguze hiyo bei ya fuel, apunguze hiyo bei ya fuel sana, sababu tumeumia sana. Akipunguza hiyo bei ya fuel, at least reduce chini, irudi chini kidogo, ndio tupate nafasi. Yeah.
Asante sana Felix. Fantastic. That is Felix, of course, one of the boda riders here in Kisumu County, just spelling out what he'll be expecting President William Ruto actually to do, so that then they can actually cushion the lives of Kenyans who depend on, of course, fuel on so many facets to ensure that indeed they can actually run their life. So my colleague will just move with me so that then I can actually talk to other ladies and, of course, other traders who have actually been at this place since morning, so that then we get to understand exactly the pinch they're actually feeling. Mama, habari yako?
Mzuri.
Nieleze wewe kama mkazi wa Kisumu, kwanza niambie biashara inaendelea vipi?
Biashara ni mbaya sasa hivi, mimi naanguka na uza tu mawe.
Unasema biashara imeanguka sasa hivi unauza mawe? Mawe. Kwa nini umeamua kuuza mawe na si bidhaa zingine?
Sina pesa ya kuchukua mali ya watu.
Sasa nikuulize mama, tungefanya vipi ama serikali ingefanya vipi kuhakikisha kwamba pengine maisha inakuwa kadri ya uwezo wa mwananchi wa kawaida anaweza kujihudumu?
Tunahangaika, hatuna pesa, watoto pia wanafukuzwa kwa shule, hatuna pesa yenye tunarudisha kwa shule. Sasa tunanguka, tunauza tu dawa na ndimu na ukwajo, hakuna pesa. Sinaona stall iko bure, hakuna pesa yenye ninaweza kuchukua mali, hakuna bila ninaweza peleka mtoto kwa shule. Sasa mimi nakaa tu.
Kitambo mama, ukifanya biashara yako ulikuwa unaweza kupeleka nyumbani pesa kiasi kipi, na hadi sasa wewe unaweza, sasa vile mahali imekuwa, unaweza peleka nyumbani pesa ngapi?
Saa hii hakuna hata pesa unaenda naye. Saa nyingine unaweza omba fare ya kuenda kwa nyumba kama unakosa pesa ya kuenda kwa nyumba. Saa hii hata chakula yenyewe hakuna, chakula wenye watoto wanakula kwa nyumba.
Well, Hashim, that is the universal cry of many Kenyans in this place. Most of them, of course, spelling out what they need the government to do, so that then, of course, the government can come to their rescue in terms of ensuring that they reduce the fuel cost, but also ensure that the cost of living actually comes down to manageable level. Of course, we'll continue with this discussion in terms of just ensuring that we get the views of Kenyans from this region, but of course our eye will also be cast on and focused on the government to see exactly what they'll be doing in terms of ensuring that they can actually heed the call of wananchi. Back to you, Hashim Aziz Abdi.
So much. That is our senior reporter Chola Simon from the Lakeside City. Always a pleasure having you. It has just given us an excerpt to this particular conversation we're having. A little bit of context. It's just told us that from Kisumu to Migori, it was about 600 Kenya shillings. Now it has been raised to 800 Kenya shillings. From Kisumu to Busia, 450 initially, but right now it is at 600. The cries not just from the matatu operators, boda operators, as well as the mama mbogas. Let me head over to Maliba. Maliba, you can see this is just a tip of the iceberg from Kisumu City. We do anticipate this is since the increase of the fuel prices on the 14th of this particular month. Now we are trying to fill that particular crunch, or you say what do you call it? We're starting to feel the effects of the hike of fuel prices. Now that is just Kisumu. Does the government need to consider reducing taxes in terms of dealing with this cost of operation, even for the mama mbogas down there?
Like I earlier on said, I think besides just calling for a review of taxes, I said that these taxes, the proposal of taxes, even by the time we legislate on because our budget is actually a legislative process. By the time we legislate on them, there's something that calls for that. As in, no one sits up and says, okay, all the guys who are putting on green today, you will pay this particular amount. It doesn't happen that way. It's like we put our expected income against the needs that we have, and you know that resources are not finite. It's not like there's a bottomless pit where you are going to have that. But then allow me to just run to the G2G, the government-to-government deal. First of all, remember, forex is the exchange rate. The exchange rate of the forex is actually a very good indicator of how the economy is doing. In countries where people then get into creativity around engineering about currency, you might actually have a very wrong indicator, thinking that we are doing very well when we are not. So, having allowed the dollar to actually have float on its own until it finds an equilibrium, it was a way for government to actually realize how the economy is actually doing. That way, you realize the health of the economy very, very easily and not lie to ourselves. Two, when we went to the G2G, the government-to-government the fuel procurement, it wasn't necessarily about fuel price only. It was also about the availability of forex for people who are doing business, people who are into importation and everything else. You realize that at the international market, it's the dollar that rules. We've got all manner of currencies out there, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be the dollar that we're going to trade with. If we had actually continued with the process, at the moment at least we hold and allow other businesses, because what was happening, getting dollars now had become quite an exercise in frustration. You wouldn't go to any bank and find even just 10,000 USD available. For every branch you will go to, you can go to our next branch, you will go to our next branch, making it so difficult for people who are in the business of export and import. So that was going to hurt other businesses. So this wasn't necessarily about the cost alone, or rather it wasn't just targeted at the cost, because fuel takes quite a big chunk of forex. So if we can delay, then we can allow the other traders, the other people, the other businesses to actually have access to forex at a fair price. Otherwise, today we will be talking about an exchange rate of 200. That is the truth. So besides it not having served fuel very well, and but if we were to return the subsidy, we will get about 200. It will still have gone higher, but then we will be at about 200. But then, like I said, the subsidy meant that we are taking what we don't have to spend on a need now. So that wasn't making sense. Why doesn't it make sense? One of those things we really do, every time we try to talk about this issue, no one wants to look back. How did we get here? If we do not look at how we got here, then we just say, okay, Kenya Kwanza is in government, they therefore should tell us about what they are going to do. It's also being foolhardy in that our debt situation, 84% of the taxes and the revenue government is, for the last 2 months, government has been, out of every 10 shillings government collects, 8 shillings and 40 cents has been going to paying debt. So it's not the same with the previous years when we came in. It's not the same with the first year when Uhuru Kenyatta, for example, took over. So we must honestly also look back and tell people, I know government is struggling to communicate. Let's just also be real that there has been a problem in coherent communication, specifically development communication. Political comms, they've done so well because it's easy to throw a barb here, you pour at somebody, and that's how you get around it. But then we also need to tell people that if for every 10 shillings we are collecting, for the last 2 months, we are paying almost 9 shillings, it means that then for the other budget needs, we have to borrow. That is a conversation we need to tell people and tell them, this is what we allowed in the last 10 years. But no, because people there's this saying about, we've had that a lot, you guys now just tell us where we are going. People who do not have the benefit of where they've come from, they probably don't know where they are, and they have no idea where they are going. So it's important that we also communicate to the public and tell them clearly that for the last 10 years, we played around with our credit facility. Kwa lugha rahisi, tulifuliza pesa yote. Sasa tuko na namba ndio, iko na limit, lakini imefulizwa. Hata nikikupatia ile pesa yenye iko kwa ile fuliza limit uko nayo, si atuko na hiyo pesa, inalipa ile fuliza na bado kuna interest ile hujalipa, and then we go down. So to ensure that we remain afloat, if I'm collecting money and paying almost all of it, all 90% of it to paying it out, then how do I, and then I have to ensure that tomorrow the survival and everything else, it means I'll still continue to borrow. So we are in a bad place, we are in a fix, and we have to actually have a bold conversation. But then in a country that is quite noisy like ours, we are very noisy. You will actually think the house is burning. And that is the beauty of democracy, by the way. The alternative of this is that then you have got people being pushed down not to speak and express their opinions, which I don't think in this country you can actually succeed in that. You can do everything else, but you can't take away the freedom of speech and devolution. If you touched on that, even if they are not working well, even if we have got a problem with the people probably uttering statements that border on hate speech or inflammatory, people will not accept to cede that particular space. It's the same way, even if governors are stealing in county government, you cannot touch a devolution. There will be a revolution. On those two things, you will not touch. So, from where we are now, I think that look at currency depreciation. We are collecting money and paying out. We are not paying that money in Kenyan shillings. We have to change that money into the dollars, and then we pay the debt. So that is actually also eating into. So number one, you'll talk about currency depreciation. These are things that sometimes when you speak, people tell you, "Hiyo ni kizungu mingi sana." But this is the science that then informs public policy, because public policy is an intersection of three things. Number one, the social infrastructure, the situation as is, how people feel now, then political goodwill, and then data, which is science now. Because you're not going to play around with numbers. You can try to do your Majitu stories and tell people things will be okay. But then, like I've said, somehow you will not lie. It will reflect. So people are earning, but that money does not make sense because of these things people say in kizungu mingi. Currency depreciation, there is inflation, and then all other things then sprout out. So if fuel is going to be the focus going forward, then I would propose that we have got a wholesome discussion about it. Because if you deal with fuel alone, like for example, now no one is talking about the cost of food inflation. There's a harvest, so a little bit of that is going down in rural areas, and the harvest is actually quite bountiful. We've done a little bit of subsidy on that particular end, and the government has got quite a good approach where we talk about we are going to subsidize production. And let us not, by the way, be afraid to talk about subsidies. The countries that we talk about that have got quite a lot of food security, the reason why we cannot compete with the food from the West, why our agriculture sector is not competing very well with the West, is because number one, they have subsidized their agriculture immensely. That is why there's a glut in milk and everything else. Secondly, I also think that we need to, that's why I kept on saying that our economic planning should be the dialogue that we need to have. Science and data out there says that if you put $1 in livestock, it's likely to come back 4 times, fourfold. But if you put $1 into agriculture, the maximum it will do will be about 2.5. So is that an option that we can actually invest in? Like, for example, we own this 4th biggest herd of cattle on the continent. Have we put in sufficient support to that particular end to ensure that we also reap out of it? Because how do I ensure that you have got money? Either I give you a job that is paying very well, or come up with a way of ensuring that the little that you get, you don't spend so much of it. So why don't we have a tannery industry that is thriving? We still are buying shoes from Turkey and elsewhere else. Why aren't we doing those things here, for example? It's because somehow we have this obsession with facing on crops and stuff, and we have not just thought about exploiting an obvious and available option, which is actually livestock, for example. So, like I said, our economic planning outlook really needs to, we need to have that dialogue. It's a dialogue that we really need to change. And feel like here it's going to be quite simplistic for us to talk about taxes only, talking about reducing taxes, and then tomorrow how does that then affect inflation? But then when you reduce on this, are we people who can be trusted on debt? Because remember, we are now running almost entirely on debt, because everything we are collecting, we are paying debt. So for us to remain a going concern, we will actually continue to do what? To borrow. So if then we go down on tax collection, on revenue collection, again, how do we raise cheaper credit to keep running?
Daktari, I'll be roping you in just a few, but I do understand that we do have Her Excellency, Pastor Dorcas Rigathi. She is currently overseeing or leading a program on matters to do with mental health. You do understand that yesterday the public service PS was talking about this particular matter, that so many people in the public service were a little bit depressed by the high cost of living. Let's head over to hear what Her Excellency Pastor Dorcas Rigathi is saying.
became like destitutes and we were living in a ghetto in Kiandutu. My uncles used to tell us not to speak. You shut up because you don't belong, you are nothing, you are all that. They would speak all that. And therefore, anytime I would come, I would struggle to stand to speak. And of course, the people who are sitting there and seeing me sweating profusely, they would think I'm afraid to speak. It is not because I was afraid to speak. It's because something in my background was affecting me. But you can see now I'm not sweating. I'm growing confident and bold every day because I feel it is very important as a mother to speak to my children, to speak to the nation. And also I make the environment around me conducive. So I always ask that when I am in an auditorium, make sure it is cold. And I thank you, Desta, because this place is very good. Through such personal narratives and shared experience, a safe space is created where individuals can open up about their mental health journeys. By doing so, one reduces stigma associated with mental health challenges and demonstrates that seeking help is the right thing to do. The holistic approach to nurturing mental well-being is commendable and aligns perfectly with the vision of a healthier and more empowered society to a dignified life. Opening up about experience on mental health must be encouraged across the board. I wish to acknowledge the youth who continue to share their experiences, especially during this summit. Your courage in opening up and sharing your experience is not only inspiring, but also a vital step towards breaking the silence that often shows mental health issues. Your stories touch hearts, change minds, and offer hope for those who are silently struggling. So continue to do it. Allow me also to commend the National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, a key partner in this endeavor. I encourage them to foster and enhance more collaborative approaches in addressing mental health and substance abuse in Kenya. The rate of alcohol and substance abuse among the Kenyans is alarming. It is affecting individuals and families across the nation. Urgent initiatives by the players like this summit that promotes awareness and understanding and support the mental health must not stop. We need to enhance them. Additionally, youth suicide has become a deeply concerning issue in Kenya. The rate at which young lives are lost to suicide and are heartbreaking to us as parents, and we are worried as a nation. It is a stark reminder of the urgency with which we must address mental health challenges amongst the youth. Finally, I know you've been waiting for that. With all partners within and without, our collaborative effort can transform and change lives, break down barriers, and create a society where mental well-being is a priority and no one suffers in silence. Thank you all for being a part of this essential conversation. May this summit be a catalyst to positive change and a source of inspiration for generations to come. I now declare the summit officially opened. God bless you and thank you very much.
All that is Her Excellency Pastor Dorcas Rigathi just expounding on a mental health panel discussion that will be happening at Daystar University. She has just touched on a number of issues on mental health. There's stigmatization. She has also encouraged the youth, mostly in that particular campus, to open up more. And she is saying that there is an alarming rate of alcohol and drug abuse as well as suicide cases across the country. Yesterday, let me rope in Daktari, the public service, that is Principal Secretary, also talked about the similar issue, saying that the number of cases of public servants within the government institutions and parastatals across the country 3 times fold are now becoming stressed, and this has been precipitated by the high cost of living. Do you tend to agree with what you're seeing from where you sit?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's my field, so I should explicitly put my input into it. It is true, issues of mental health has become alarming in this country, and of course globally. This has been necessitated by the fact that there are a lot of external pressures that have hit each and every person in the society. And you know very well, civil servants are not exceptional from those pressures. You know very well there is the climate crisis, which plays a great role in terms of depressions and many other mental health issues. There is work-related stresses that is affecting quite a number of workers. There are environment within which employees work in that are not conducive. Of course, cost of living, which is very high as well, also contributes largely into the state of mind of a particular individual. And we know very well when the PS says that situations are alarming and there are quite a number of people who are committing suicide. It is true, and we know as we celebrate this month, 21st I think is the day that we celebrate World Suicide Prevention Day. And the whole month covers definitely the issue of mental health, and that's why Her Excellency is also playing a great role in terms of advocating for that particular aspect. I think we need to accept the reality and go for it, in that mental health is real. Stigma has been the issue of barriers in mental health cases, and a number of people don't want to be associated with having a mental health illnesses. And one thing that is very crucial that I tell everybody in this nation and wherever they are viewing us from is that mental health is real, and it's like any other illness. And it's something, it's a disease, or rather a situation that can be managed. When you come to the right people at the right time, then you are able to be secured from that situation and be able to move about with your own normal life. So generally, it is something that has not been in discussion in countries where development has not been much. In Western countries, you see mental health issues are addressed primarily as a priority in every aspect of life, including employees' welfare and employees' rights are always looked at. An example, I know she has pointed out that the major people who are affected are our police officers. At what kind of environment do our police officers live in? One, you see they are exposed to traumas on day-to-day life. You'll find they are the ones who are immediate responders to anywhere where there is death. And every other aspect of life, when you are exposed to a situation that you are not used to, you are completely affected mentally. And you are supposed to go into what is called debriefing, or a process of counseling or psychotherapy. In that you got exposure to, in your line of duty, you got exposure to conditions that you are not expecting. You are asked to pick people who have been killed from one place to another and take them to the mortuary, or ensure that if they are still alive and they are injured, you take them to the hospital. And when the police officers are doing such duties, it is very traumatizing for that individual police officer who got exposed to that situation. And generally, I think we need to come up with a program whereby at any one time that someone gets a situation where he needs to be counseled, counseling services should be provided and should be mandatory, because many people assume that the situation they meet around or the situation they come across is normal because they get shocked, they think about it, they dream about it, they don't sleep at night and always thinking about that same situation, but eventually damages their mental status, and when they go into depression is when they start seeking medication, and then is when people tell them this person is not even normal. And yet, when you look at it gradually, how this person has reached that level, each and every one of us were observing. None of us took that initiative to make sure that you guys, because of certain exposure, there's what is called post-traumatic stress disorder. And partly these are the things that affect people who are in the front line. Health workers are similarly facing the same situation as they go through these similar conditions. Sometimes you get breakdown. The other thing is work burnout. I know people who sit in the office or who on day-to-day life, they come to the office at 5 o'clock and they leave at 10 o'clock. That way you are damaging your mental status and your productivity will be reducing day by day. And in essence, what you are supposed to do is that the moment you have a work burnout like that, then you need to reverse and relax and go and recuperate so that you are able to be productive. But above all, work within the working hours and make sure you have enough time to relax or sleep. 8 hours is generally a healthy hours for an individual to sleep in 24 hours. And that way you are able to control your mental status and you are able to live your life productively and of course be useful in the society.
Maliba, I'll allow you to have your voice after this short commercial break. What we're conversing here, dear viewers, is about the cost of living. If you're just joining us, you can also chime in into the conversation through our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1, at Abdiaziz Hashim 1 as well. What do you make of the cost of living, and can you be ascertained by the current government if it will address this particular matter? Don't go too far. We'll be back with our conversation after this short commercial break.
이유야를 막론하고 제 불찰입니다. 죄송합니다.
테러 현장에서 유지연을 도와준 건 분명 테리우스야. 숨겨두고 나한테는 모른다고 했는가? 이 여자 당장 잡아.
왜 이래요? 이거 나요!
고혜리 씨, 가서
Tafadhali.
Well, I hope Dingo amekupatia habari kwamba lawyer alikuwa hapa jana. And very soon Abel wangu atakuja hapa kuishi na sisi. Itakuwa ndoa yetu si ya kubahatisha tena. We will be a family. Oh yes. That is the face I want to see for the rest of my life.
Hapa hakuna cha kurelax. Baba na mama kila siku wagombana huko juu. Hapa vurugu mwanzo mwisho. Mama mdogo naye yuko lakini yeye naye ana yake kabisa, mara yuko mara hayuko.
Mama njoo huku, mimi nakuhitaji.
Good morning once more and welcome to the show. This is News Check. I am your host Abdiaziz Hashim and my co-anchor this morning is Lensa Odingo. We are discussing the issue of the cost of living, and if you're just joining us, we have at least extraneously talked about it in the first hour of our program. We have Dr. Isaac Hassan, the political and governance expert, as well as Arnold Maliba, a public policy analyst. We were talking about the cost of living and how it can be interlinked to the mental health issues that we're witnessing across the country. Right now, we do understand Her Excellency Pastor Dorcas Rigathi is at Daystar University having a panel, a roundtable panel discussion on the same issue. And yesterday we saw the public service PS, that is Amos Njoroge in Naivasha, conversing the same way, to the extent saying that the amount of public servants coming for psychosocial services to their various outlets, it's majorly contributed by the high cost of living. And that is why I want to rope in Arnold Maliba. Arnold, we are talking about people seeking solace in the bottle in many occasions, and this has been exacerbated or precipitated to some extent by the high cost of living. Do you tend to agree with the Principal Secretary?
Well, definitely yes. I don't know whether that is at macro level, but I think there is a direct correlation between the cost of living and, of course, the mental well-being of a nation. Let me make it easy. There are a lot of sicknesses that we have that can simply be treated by money. You don't need to go to hospital. You don't. Actually, normally there's the joke that the message you have confirmed you have received, yes, the M-Pesa message, when it shows up on your screen, there's the life that it comes up with.
Some joy to it.
Yeah, there's somebody who could actually be sick and closed up in the house, but once they actually confirm that their bank account has actually been credited, they then wash up, dress, and then go out. Sometimes not even to spend the money, but then they've. So, cost of living. And specifically I want to talk about financial stability. So with financial stability comes with well-being, because you can take care of yourself and those who depend on you. And then after that, of course, then you clearly are able to function optimally, at least to a level where you feel like you're useful to yourself and society. That comes directly to mental health. And of course, because this month is the Suicide Watch Month, I think that is what it's called, something. Of course, mental health, and then leading directly to that, because a lot of guys have decided that if it can't hold, then they have no meaning being around, so they check out by way of suicide. So here we are. So when we deal with the issue of mental health, we should also find ways of ensuring that we plug it directly into economic planning, we plug it into governance, we plug it into public policy. Because when we have got this conversation, somehow in this country people have got this idea that governance is so much removed from some of these things, yet it contributes directly. Just get to see how people are actually talking. When we were interviewing guys in Kisumu, you see guys telling you, I'm going back home. Do you know going back home what it really means? Especially for those of us who come from the West. It means, okay, I'm done now, I'm going to retire and wait for my death. So that destitution and lack of hope is not a good thing. But then do our policymakers, do our leaders, economic planners and everybody else really, are they able to juxtapose these two and say that this particular policy decision I will make can actually send somebody to an early grave? And once it does that, does it, for example, exacerbate the situation? Because if I am a parent and I'm hanging myself, I'm leaving behind children that are young and therefore leaving a burden to other people, because the money is not going to fall from the sky to take care of those particular children. It's the same way when we talk about the harm reduction approach. Again, as a country, we have been too careful around some of these issues. I'll give you a little bit of on the edge example. A woman of, let me say, a sex worker in the streets who also dates a drug user. So we feel like we cannot provide syringes for the people who inject themselves. Let's start from that end. There is just an illustration. So this particular person, they end up sharing syringes where they use those injectables. One of them is infected with HIV, the other one is not. So by sharing syringes, one of them becomes HIV positive. He dates a sex worker, for example. Mheshimiwa lives in Nairobi, and you know they share these people. Normally there is no classes. is in Mombasa for whatever function, or even a preacher or whoever it is gets up to that particular end, you realize, but by just availing a syringe, we will actually stop, because this man comes back from Mombasa, he's infected, he infects the wife, who infects the watchman, who goes home and infects the wife, and the wife infects the another person in the village, and that whole cycle could actually have been prevented at the point of just using the harm reduction approach.
Prevention is better than cure.
That if we reduce, because we are not able to completely reduce, but we can actually reduce harm. We cannot prevent. A lot of these things cannot be prevented, but we can reduce. So if harm reduction was a concept that informed how public policy, how decisions are done, even for organizations, you will realize that tunapunguza makali. Because a simple thing, how much is a syringe? Could be 10 shillings, 15 shillings. But just see the cycle that it takes, and then the burden that then comes in. If you have got now then people who eventually along the way we are supporting, some of them get out of the economy, they are not able, for example, to provide for themselves, so they are no longer being able, they are not productive. So that cycle goes on a long way. It is the same thing with the mental health. That if we made policies that reduce, let me use the concept harm reduction, let me have the liberty of using it even for economy, that if we were to come up with policies that lighten the burden, using the word to lighten the burden for me would be reducing harm. That means that I will be able to actually provide easily for my family, and a family that is well provided for, comes up, can actually contribute and participate in the economy much, much better. But then we go around these things and we work in silos. So you're going to find health workers, people in the mental health, working alone with the proposal. There's a very good policy, mental health policy in this country. But how it's plugged into all other facets of the economy and the country is where the problem then begins. Because that should then reflect even how we train HR, how we train workers. Because you're going to have a HR, for example, who is quite insensitive. So simple things that can actually, they are low-lying fruits that you can run away with. But then somehow we don't see that the decision I make at work as a boss has got some direct correlation with how somebody will treat their wife or children at home. A simple thing. You keep me here till late, I am not able to reason well, I get home, I pass that to my wife, who then passes to the child, and then we are bringing up a very angry generation. Have you seen how Kenyans are angry on social media? We call ourselves woke, and people being savage. For me, there's not so much about wokeness and savagery in that. It's so much of people that are crying out. There's a mental health issue. You cannot be an angry nation that is fighting everybody. Kenyans versus Nigerians, Kenyans versus South Africans. We beat everybody on social media, and we think that we are an angry nation. There is a problem around that. So even as we talk about mental health, probably we also need to talk about how we are manifesting differently. And these are very normal people. You look at them as normal, but see what they write.
We're coming back to that particular conversation. I want to take you back to the coastal city, where we do understand that the National Assembly Speaker, Honorable Moses Wetangula Masika, will be inaugurating House leadership and the committee chairperson's leadership retreat aimed at enhancing the legislative agenda. I do understand that the Senate Speaker, that is Amason Jeffa Kingi, is currently addressing the media. Let's get to listen there. I do understand now it's Wetangula. Let's hear from the National Assembly Speaker, Moses Wetangula, on the legislative agenda.
By standing united, we can lessen the burden on Kenyans. This retreat is a unique opportunity to come together as representatives of the diverse voices that make up our nation. We must engage in thoughtful discussions, share our experiences, and find common ground on various issues. It is my hope that the bonds we will have forged during this retreat will extend beyond these walls and into our daily work in the National Assembly. Honorable members, allow me to thank you all for giving priority to the Climate Change Amendment Act 2023. The passage of the law in the run-up to the Africa Climate Summit that was hosted in Nairobi by His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto placed Kenya in the lead in crafting elaborate climate response mechanisms. In the same breath, allow me to thank you for being great hosts to our colleagues from other parliaments during the Parliamentary Dialogue Forum that was held at the National Assembly chambers. Let us always be at the forefront of participating in events that contribute to the legislative discourse and at the center of our mandate. I want to single out Our Lady Honorable Gadambi, who co-chaired the forum with Senator Moses Kajwang from the Senate. And yours truly here was there on hand to give a keynote address, an address that have been called by various African presidents to associate themselves with. As I conclude, honorable members, I put forth a resounding call to action a call that transcends political divides and reaffirms our shared responsibility as leaders of this great nation. Having been entrusted with the leadership roles in the National Assembly, let us offer godly leadership to ensure that our country attains its goals for the good of society. Let us remember that unity does not mean the absence of different opinions. Commonly, I say unity is not uniform. Unity is being together. It means the ability to work together despite our differences. It means transcending partisanship when the interests of the nation are at stake. Our people look to us for leadership, and they deserve nothing less than our very best efforts in the service. Honorable members, as we embark on this retreat, let's be guided by the knowledge that our common goals are greater than our political differences. Let us chart a course towards a brighter future for Kenya, where sustainability, equity, and prosperity are not mere aspirations, but our lived reality. By the end of this retreat, I'm confident that we will emerge with a renewed sense of purpose, armed with the strategies and plans that will propel our legislative agenda forward. The challenges we face are significant. They are not insurmountable, as I said. Together we can chart a course towards a more prosperous, just, and sustainable Kenya. Let us embrace the spirit of collaboration and build the synergy in leadership that our nation deserves. I wish you all a fruitful and inspiring retreat. It is now my duty and singular pleasure and privilege to declare this retreat officially open. Let me just add, like everybody who spoke before me, to welcome my distinguished junior in the legal profession, the distinguished Moses Cheboy, who has had a very good, eventful career at Parliament, rising to be our deputy speaker, and above all, we used to call him the parliamentary FM. He was the principal entertainer at Parliament, very hilarious, very knowledgeable, very friendly. I don't know anybody in Parliament who ever disagreed with Cheboy. Welcome to this session, Moses, and no wonder you share a name with yours truly.
Well, he is known in many quarters as Papa Waruma, that is the National Assembly Speaker. Moses Wetangula just steering the legislative agenda House leadership meeting at the coastal city in terms of inaugurating House leadership and the committee chairpersons in the particular National Assembly in various committees. And of course, we'll duly have our reporters packaging that story in our subsequent bulletins. We'll also be conversing what legislators can do for us as Kenyans in terms of the cost of living beyond the passage of the Finance Act 2023. But to get back to the conversation that we're having here in the studio, I was about to rope in Daktari. Daktari, we are talking about the number of suicide cases in this country. It's not the first time we're covering stories, especially for media houses, where a mother is forced to use a sufuria, a little bit of water, to just warm it to the extent kids can think she's cooking or she's preparing something for us. But at the end of the day, the kids sleep on a hungry stomach. how can we contain these particular cases to ensure that we tame the number of suicide cases in conjunction with the high cost of living?
Thank you very much. I think we need to understand that the reality has caught up with us in terms of mental health issues, and mental illness is real in this country and in any other country around the globe. As it is evident, we can hardly a week goes without getting a news in the media in regards to families who have succumbed to mental illnesses, who have either committed suicide, who have either violently committed domestic violence and killed each other, or those who have collapsed and gone schizophrenic and went out of their normal life. As we focus and increase the awareness of mental illnesses, particularly this month that we talk about suicide prevention,
yes,
we need to understand what is it in terms of warning signs for suicidal behaviors. You'll realize that when certain behaviors emerges with the individual, it creates a cause for worrying. For example, when you have social isolations or feeling alone, just note that there is an issue in regards to your mental status. When you start all of a sudden having aggressiveness and irritability, getting annoyed, angers, as he mentioned, even we get angers on social media.
Yes.
These are signs of mental illnesses, particularly suicidal warning signs. When you start possessing lethal means, start engaging yourself on lethal issues, or feeling like a burden to other people, or dramatic changes in mood and behavior, these are things that you can observe them while you are at home, you can observe them while you are at work, and you can help someone out of that situation before this particular persons commit suicide. For example, again, when the other sign is like frequently talking about death, you'll see some guys talking about their narration every other time is about death.
Yes.
That is not a very good sign. When there is a history of suicidal behaviors, that this particular person tried to commit suicide sometimes back, this is also another component that we need to watch over and see. Once we see this kind of behavior with someone, then we need to be worried that this particular person has an issue regarding suicide. The other thing is engaging risky behaviors. You know, sometimes people will just wake up and start having something that is very risky, and people will ask, why is this person doing this? Oh, kwani yeye amekuwa wazimu? You know, people start pointing fingers at that particular person. But that particular person requires help, because those are warning signs that this person is likely to commit suicide. Feeling like you don't belong to anyone, you have no belongings, you don't feel like being part of the society, is also another sign that we need to watch through. Giving things away, you just wake up and you start giving out everything of yours that you need. You see, give out all your money and dispatching everything. Alcohol and drug misuse, like Her Excellency mentioned, is also one of the signs, early warning signs for committing suicide, or early signs of people who are likely to commit suicide. Feeling trapped, feeling worthlessness, and definitely those are areas that we need to watch. This does not require a doctor to tell you that these signs can be examined or can be technical. No, it's something that you can do it through observation. You could observe people you are living with, particularly people who you are living with in the same house, people who are your neighbors, people who you work with. And I know very well in the field of mental health, people rarely admit that there is a situation or crisis in regards to mental illnesses. And I know quite a number of people, when they come up with unique behaviors outside their usual behaviors, we like condemning them. We just tell them, huyu amekuwa wazimu, bona anataka nini? And you are trying to more stigmatize him more then you would have been helpful to him. And these are signs that I will suggest employers, human resource personnel, family members, and every other person who interact with an individual must be watching over, so that we help each other to come out of this situation, which now has been increased or enhanced by the factors that we are having a high cost of living, and we are going through a very difficult time. And of course, when the El Nino come, more people will be still depressed and will be involved, because they're going to lose their homes due to floods and other factors. There will be a lot of illnesses related to waterborne diseases, and therefore there are a lot of things that needs to be looked into when we are addressing the current status of our mental well-being, which is something that we must consider and put into all our systems that is functional.
Okay. If you're just wondering and joining us, we're talking about how mental health is linked to the current rise of the cost of living. I want to take you to a Nairobi hotel where I do understand that Her Excellency, the Governor, Kirinyaga Governor, and the Chair of the Council of Governors, that is Anne Mumbi Waiguru, is currently attending an event dubbed Badiliko, an innovative and public participation game poised to transform the landscape of civic engagement in the country. And let's get to hear from Her Excellency, the Governor.
By the way, I also have to say there's a recurrent expenditure because also the county assembly. So there's also a budget close to maybe 700 million that will go to the county assembly to run the assembly, for them to be able to pass the laws, for us to be able to use Badiliko as a public participation tool. Because we can't just wake up and say that now we are going to use it and then start mining info from there. Someone will go to court and say it's an illegal means, and that's not actually. So there's all this. So then you go for public participation and you say, here we are. We have 1 billion shillings. Last year already, because last year you did certain things, there are certain things that must be done this year, right? The fixed cost type of things. For example, if you gave bursary of 100 million last year, you can't wake up this year and say you'll give 20. The public will not accept it. You're either increasing or increasing, right? So that bursary figure is already removed. You already building a hospital. I'm building 2 level. I've just finished my level 5. Kirugwea Hospital. It took us 3 years to do that. I'm now in the process of finalizing 2. Kianyaga and Kimbimbi level 4 hospitals upgrade. So they're halfway, right? So the money for that hospital has to be input for this year. So remove 100 million, that's 200. So 300. So how much do I have left? That is the resource that now we would be having to talk about. Do I fix your road or your bridge? Or do I finish the health center that is not complete? Do we build a market? What is it that we can do? Now, why did I start from that point of view? I said, people come and give all manner of views. Now, it's very difficult when you've gone from one village to another, because every village will have priorities. And the money that you have is not possible to split it to deal with those emerging issues. For example, a bridge will cost a lot more than maybe doing a Maram Road, right? But every ward wants first, before you even talk, every ward wants an equivalent amount of money first allocated. That's what we call the ward fund. So I had even forgotten about the ward fund. So give 20 million or 15 million per ward. I have 20 wards. This year I'm giving 15, so that's 300 million, remove it. So we have been left with 400. So 400 is what we're discussing right now. And now you have to come up with priorities. It's tough. But what do we get on social media and on the platforms? This governor is not working. This governor is not working. They're not doing anything. It rains. They do this all the time. And there's our roads, many rural roads are Maram, and a car gets stuck. They take that picture. It circulates on social media. Our governor is asleep. How can this road be like this? One of my people are asleep somewhere or some truck, and you know how these people are sometimes. People go and decide they're going to litter in some random place, which is not the designated. There is a bin, but they just decide they're going to pour their stuff, for whatever reason, down. And of course, we're assuming that everybody's using the bins that we have set up, and we have a timetable for the days that they're going to be collected, isn't it? Someone takes a picture and says, look how filthy this town has become, because somebody has decided not to follow the rules, and that becomes your problem. That's how we wake up in the morning. You wake up to all manner of text messages. And then again,
well, that is the chair of the Council of Governors, Anne Waiguru, at the Badiliko launch. It's all about gauging and the importance of public participation. Where public coffers are concerned, most definitely you'll have public participation. You'll have your say in where those particular funds will be taken to and where do we expect them to be invested in. But to that conversation that we're having on the cost of living, we have seen the Council of Governors, we have seen the members of Parliament. That's why I want to rope in Mr. Maliba here. Maliba, what can the National Assembly especially do for us, even after the passage of the Finance Act 2023, to at least try and mitigate the current situation?
I think, first of all, Parliament as is illegal. You are talking about the cost of living.
Yes.
But then you are asking me about a tool that we should be using. So if we don't talk about the status of that tool, we are also not being serious. You want to do an exam, you don't have a pen, and you are walking into an exam room. How are you going to do that exam? So it's also time we did an audit on the functionality of Parliament. Parliament as an institution is actually quite robust. They have got an Institute of Parliamentary Studies doing quite well. But somehow Parliament is not primed properly to solve our problems. There's a reason why parliamentarians are called wajumbe. They are sent by the people to deliver a message. Na ukitumwa, ukishaambiwa majibu, pia unarudi unapeana kwa ground. I had already mentioned that national government CDF, as is today, is the biggest hindrance to a properly functioning government. You do not need even an opposition. The way we thought of our governance structure as a country at the 2010 passage of the Constitution, we moved the oversight function to Parliament and gave them the power that initially had been left for what was called opposition, and therefore opposition could actually be played around with. You can deny them funding, you can jail them, you can chase them around, and therefore it couldn't be effective. So when Dr. Hassan here speaks so much, in the days of old, I would exile him. So if I exile him, then that particular noise and everything that was happening goes away. We wanted to actually enrich our governance, and by so doing, we decided to come up with what we call checks and balances. And in doing checks and balances, we thought that when we reduce the imperial presidency, move some of that power to the to the judiciary and the legislature, then we will have a balance in our governance. Like I said, there are three main functions that we talk of being parliamentary functions. That is, number one is representation. The biggest of them all is representation. Number two is legislation. And number three is oversight. Of course, oversight cannot function effectively without the Office of the Auditor General. Somehow you realize that that function has also been stifled. Now, if you are to look in Parliament, you will also realize that budget making is a function of parliamentarians.
Yes.
Today, if you were to ask a lot of parliamentarians about our budgeting processes, they might not really take you along properly, forgetting that this is one of the jobs they're supposed to be doing. Because, like I said, Parliament is not a late endorser to the budget making process like it used to be in the days of old. Parliament is a budget making body. So when you're talking about revenue, you're talking about taxes, you're talking about the cost of living, the place it should squarely sit should be on the floor of the House at both the three levels. At the national level, we have got the Senate.
Yes.
And because cost of living is also affects counties. So at the Senate and, of course, the National Assembly. And we have got legislature at county level. So
the members of the county assembly.
So at least I can actually say, okay, for MCAs, let's put them aside and just talk about parliamentarians, both the Senate and the National Assembly. These guys, and that's why you see even the senators are now busy looking for the oversight fund. We also, when we were doing CDF was for us a pilot project for devolution, decentralizing resources and decision making. Because initially, it's the president who was making all those decisions. And even the district development board that used to be there was not something, if your leaders are Sumbua, then we in Nairobi will decide we don't send you money. If we don't like how you look like, we cannot send you money. So even that district development board didn't serve so well. So when we started CDF, it was a pilot project. And it worked well. What I now refuse to agree is that in the spirit of the Constitution 2010, we continue having parliament with CDF. Why I say that is that there is a direct correlation with the death of parliament as parliament and CDF. Because even if you met MPs that you know who are your friends, they'll tell you, why should I go and struggle with difficult documents in parliament? I just need to ensure that my CDF is well shared and I'll get a re-election. So, and is that their function? No, even in the separation of powers. And then CDF becomes, number one, a distraction, number two, a trap. Because when you misuse CDF, sometimes when the executive, we've forgotten, we saw that, it's not happening yet, but then in the past we saw, if you are a member of parliament, you have misused your CDF, what happens with me as the executive on the day when I want your vote by force to pass a policy, probably a tax, we will just remind you that, by the way, this is how you used your CDF. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want? And it's also now being used just to distract members of parliament and also to manipulate them. So to have parliament as the people's watchmen. Now to come to your question,
yes,
where parliament can take committee work seriously, because the committee system is supposed to enhance and enrich specialization. It also gives members of parliament much more time, because parliament is so big, you cannot have all members speaking on the floor. Some of them have got very good skill sets in some of those places, and representation will be so good when you are in the committee that actually is, because for example, if you're going to find members of Northeastern, members of parliament from Northeastern, most likely you will see them in agriculture and livestock, department around that, in trade. In Western, you'll also see them in agriculture, livestock and stuff. So members of parliament have gone to committees that look like the areas they come from. But are they really paying attention in those committees where decisions are made? Like for example, budget is in parliament 3 times before you see it publicly.
Yes.
Yet you meet a member of parliament who is also just as surprised as you. When the parliamentary budget office, for example, was going through this, and the budget, different levels were going to different committees, these members of parliament who were acting surprised, didn't they know that we would get here? You know, you can tell the price of fuel 3 months from now, because we know the cost of fuel, the crude oil now, right? You can work out the transportation costs and everything, and so you know that by the time it lands here in the next 90 days, you know how it looks like. So number one, we need to rethink parliament completely, and we will keep on talking about this, because the more we try to get creative around this CDF thing, we should give it to governors, because we need a more liberated parliament. How do you defend a lion? You release it. This particular lion that we call parliament, members of parliament, are jailed in a cage called National CDF. It's distracting them, and it's actually keeping them busy, not doing their work. So oversight is not there. They can't ask the executive serious questions. They can't do their best in just working on the budgeting process, for example. So if there is anywhere to start, I know there is a long shot. They are short end, of course. They can come in. We have got a budget review window normally. So they can always come in and actually review the Finance Act and give us a reprieve. It's okay. But in the long term, is this short-term reprieve really what we need? Because we will be here in the next 90 days. We will be here in the next 40 days. You know, you can even tell with the exactitude of a prophet that this is what is going to happen in the next 30 days. So, doing away temporary stops, can we do a wholesome looking at this particular document?
Daktari, to that particular point, the governors already, they do have a kitty, which is the shareable revenue. You even heard from Anne Waiguru there speaking. Malibe is proposing that we should even hand over the CDF to the governors. What can the governors do now with the funds that they have to at least alleviate this particular burden Kenyans are going through now?
It is true that the essence of having the CDF was purposely to take resources closer to
the counties.
And now the county in 2010 constitution realized that the county government and became operational. And it is important for us to look at it from that perspective and see if it is possible to withdraw that constituency fund. But it's not an easy thing. It's
Actually,
like
the court ruled it's illegal.
It is like touching. It's like touching.
It's a matter even before the bipartisan
Exactly.
talk. Okay.
Yes. So it's an issue of. It's like touching the counties or touching very sensitive things within the country, which is okay. We have no problem with it. Kenya is not about. Kenya is not about resource allocation. Kenya is about effectively utilization of those resources for intended purposes. And this is one thing that we want to look at. And your question was, are the governors actually doing the right thing? And what are they doing with those resources? A number of governors perhaps might have shown some significant progress in terms of delivering services based on their mandate. But a number of them are just playing still a game of making money. And you will realize recently there was a conversation. I know it is before the court, so I don't want to dwell on it much. But an employee who earns less than 50,000, having over 650 million in his account or worth more than $1 billion is an alarming. And that has not just happened. It must have happened through the support of a governor, because an employee will never access such kind of resources. Even if you allow him to do corruption of the highest order, he will not get that access. He must have got some people who are supporting him. So, for example, in northern Kenya, where we have a lot of challenge in infrastructure, where we have a lot of challenge in basic needs, droughts, water services, and all this, our priorities are upside down. I like Her Excellency Anwar Iguru saying that this is how our budget looks like. We have a lot of needs that needs to be worked on or covered, but each and every one of us must make a priority, and we always go for the one we think is easier to manage and fix the situation as fast as possible, which is a very good explanation in terms of how resources should be utilized. But when the priorities go upside down and much of our priority becomes, for example, we don't have adequate clean water, which is a basic need. We don't have proper health facilities. We don't have road infrastructures. And your priority is constructing offices or big houses within the county. It's like upside down. So I think it's governors and resources allocated. I must say that resources are sufficient for that purpose, because you can only call insufficient resources when you have proved how best you have utilized the little you have been given. And therefore, the little they have been given, there is lack of inconsistency in terms of prioritization of development agendas and the basic needs. And therefore, one thing that perhaps my friend, as he's saying, we should move the CDF money into that side. Let's first utilize what they have been given and prove to us that the amount of budget we have been given has been utilized for this purpose. And because of the needs, we need additional top-up for purposes of covering the remaining. If you go and ask some of the governors today, what is it that actually your county requires as a plan? They do not have a single programmatic plan where they can tell you, we have all these enormous requirements that we need to fulfill, and on that note, the budget of this year covers up to this level, and then we are able to see whether we are able to mobilize resources, either extra resources from other source or subsequent year's budget, if we are able to cover another component of that particular element of their plan. But when you ask them what is it that they have at hand, quite often you will realize that none of them have proper plan. The other thing, for example, this is something that I think is something to discuss as early as now. I know other countries which perhaps I have some link with in terms of some technical input. They have already put very well their strategic plan for the El Nino and what exactly emergency preparedness plans they have put in place in order to have minimal casualties or effect, even if it comes. But now I don't see that coming out at the moment, particularly in the county governments, because that is where the the issue will be addressed. That's where the issue will going to hit hard. So,
but we've seen two governors, especially Swamad of Mombasa and Sakaj of Nairobi.
Exactly.
Yes.
These two have picked up some few things. And when you look at these two, you know, they are counties that we always look at as well-established counties. Nairobi is the capital city. And you'll be forced to do some things because majority of the technocrats are already here and they don't want to have a mess in the city, and therefore they will be pushing for their right. Mombasa equally is a tourist county, and you know it's a place that people will have experienced quite a number of floods because majority of these floods will empty in the lowlands at the sea, and therefore they already know that they expect that floods. But how many counties do we have? 47. And are they actually considering that there will be crisis soon, end of October probably, or that the country will going to face crisis in terms of the El Nino, and it's a phenomenon that has no one to blame. It is just a climate effect, and the only thing we can do is to have a proper preparedness plan that will minimize the risk or the damages that is likely to come with this. For example, just advocating for how to work on clean water and how to prevent mosquitoes or malaria within the communities in the areas in your county. It's a simple thing, but you know the content of that messages will going to prevent quite a number of things and prevent people from illnesses in order for you not to have a lot of burden in your facilities.
Aside from the health impacts or the devastation that the El Nino might cost, how can we leverage it, Maliba, to ensure that we boost our production in terms of food in the agriculture sector so that we can be food secure, especially in those areas that are experiencing drought in the northern parts of the country?
I might not have a direct answer to that. I have looked at the map, the El Nino map, the projected places where and in what volumes it will actually show up. Right from central Somalia up to northeastern Kenya and part of coast will actually experience the heaviest rains. They will actually receive the highest amount of, or rather volume of the El Nino rain. Let's just start. If you look at that area, except for the Hirshabelle region, that because of that river is a little bit green and normal agriculture happens on that particular end. The rest is quite arid and semi-arid. So there are areas that will do with good rain, right? But away from Somalia, let's talk about Kenya. Northeastern will actually be receiving in Kenya. Northeastern will actually be receiving the highest amount of that rainfall.
Yes.
Do counties have a budget to start with? An El Nino focused budget to intervene and do anything on it? I doubt they do.
Maybe the emergency funds that they already have, they could redirect it.
What percentage? Those percentages are so lean. So if you look at the works that are required, like for example, if we were to put up even temporary dams to collect that water, it might be useful for a couple of weeks rather than people taking their livestock so far. Now you have got free water coming in. Do we even have geospatial plans in the first place that could actually inform where you can put up a temporary dam, for example, to collect the water and how to play around with that? Literally, there is no one who has thought about it from the way you are thinking about food security and harvesting that water and making use of it. We will drain all that water to the ocean, like he said. So, and even in preparedness, it's good to talk about how we are preparing to meet this particular monster that is quote-unquote El Nino.
Yes.
But why are our drainages blocked, for example? Did county governments do the blocking? They didn't. We as a people did the blocking. We dumped in wrong places. We continuously are doing that. And immediately the streets flood, we will be there talking about Serikali's idea. These things also, away from pointing fingers to authorities and everything else, it also comes back to us. In other jurisdictions and in other countries that we like to compare ourselves with, you will realize that people do not do the things we do here. So we want to be like the West. In the West, people have got habits and traditions of doing things the right way. The drainage in Nairobi that Sakaja is busy unblocking, I don't think he has been dumping around the whole place. Of course, we'll talk about the county not being able to collect. So some of those things also fall on us. And what we should actually be talking about is not just how we are prepared to meet it. the infrastructure is going to be hurt. Bridges and roads are likely to be hurt. Already we are complaining about the taxes on oil or on fuel, which ordinarily are used to maintain the infrastructure like road and everything else. So even after that, so we've had COVID-19. I would like us to actually have this conversation. What has actually been lacking and what you see out there is a government communication that is bereft of reason, empathy, and leveling up with the people. You know, there's this lie that arrogance with a little dash of intellectualism looks like you are being woke and you can speak people down because you are an economist, you are CAs, or you are whoever. So normally a lot of it is not like people are being truthful. You're just being bad-mannered. You know, all of us, when we show up to work or even in social places, there are two things we must bring to work, or rather to bring to those particular places: good upbringing and good manners.
Yes.
So even in office, you don't bring arrogance with a little bit of a sprinkling of intellectualism and tell people take it or leave it. So, you know, we are a society. Also, meet people and tell them, okay, ni kubaya. As a parent, you're telling kids, nyinyi ni wadogo, hamfanyi kazi hapa hivi, hata kama mko na njaa, kufeni njaa, kwani nyinyi mnafanyaga kazi. Does that inspire confidence in their children? So as a country, we are at a bad place. I think government should hasten to have a government spokesperson, harmonize its communication, and take CSS and PSS to a fresh governance course. Because these guys have forgotten even the collective way of approaching government, how to communicate and everything else. So I was talking about where we are. We have not recovered from COVID. Yes, we've not recovered from COVID fully. We have got the fuel situation here. You will talk about it just being 5%. But the ripple effect and how it goes down is quite big. First of all, of course, that 5% is an increment. Number two, OPEC has actually been producing lesser fuel, 3.6 million barrels reduced, and that is 4% of what we use daily. Winter is coming in the north. That means that diesel and paraffin are being hoarded by those particular people because of heating. And the Russian supply of gas has actually been cut because of the war in
the sanctions,
the Ukraine-Russia war. And still on the same, Russian ships. But Russia has got the biggest known oil reservoirs on earth.
Yes.
Russian ships that supply, when you're talking about transportation, are also under sanctions, so they cannot go in one place. They cannot. The way oil used to flow down here is not the same. And then now we have got El Nino. And I have to mention this. We have got political instability with a political side that has refused to move from 9th August 2022. So we still have got issues about going to the streets, a national dialogue and everything else. We will need much more than just talking and a few stopgap measures here. We need to strap up, but then government communication needs to shape up.
Given that we're entering the final leg of the show, I just want to pick your brain on a development that we saw yesterday evening that is continuing right now and has sparked a debate both on and offline. It was Ezra Chiloba who was suspended as the Director General of the Communication Authority of Kenya. Now, Chiloba's suspension was announced Monday evening in an internal memo issued by the authority's chairperson, Mary Mungai. Now, following Chiloba's suspension, Mr. Christopher Wambua will be taking over the reins in an acting capacity. Let me start with you, Daktari. What do you make of Chiloba's suspension right now?
I think first suspension as an employee, I mean, the employer knows best in terms of what has led to that suspension. And the rest of the thing will be political guess that we will want to make. Chiloba has been the CEO for IEBC. And then later he is when he was engaged to lead the Communication Commission of Kenya. And I mean, the reasons are not still out. I don't think if anyone has that reason why Chiloba was suspended.
But the timing of it, though.
The timing of it all, I think there's some a bit of politics in it, in terms of exactly his relationship with the previous government. But again, above all, I don't think it would be unfair for me to conclude that he was being shown the door because he was actively in the previous government. Politicians will always say that when you want to defend someone or you want to point out the reason as to why someone has been exited. But I think there are a number of issues in terms of communication, control of communication within the government system. And when we look at it very keenly, there are a number of communication overlap that has happened within the system. I see Professor the PS for Kisiangani arguing in one of the media house, saying that the board has done their job, and I'm not aware of why he has been suspended, but it's normal for someone to be suspended. And if he gets full information, he will give out his statement and inform Kenyans. But again, that the discussion revolved around whether it is lack of control or systemized way of having government communication passed to the public Kenyans. Because you'll realize when the CS Moses Kuria gave out his message, then of course that created a lot of debate.
Yes.
And then the Deputy President also gave out his insight in terms of that comment that was given out by Moses Kuria. And when you look at it keenly, everybody talks about the government might be doing very well. The government has the president might have a focus where he wants this government to be, but his troops are inconsistent with communications that they are passing out, and including contradicting each other.
Yes.
And the moment government start contradicting each other, people have a cause to worry, because there will be no proper governance in place when you see each and every person speaks the way he wants. The only time we experienced that is when we had the Nusu Mukate government, where the Baba's team could speak. They are in the government, they are ministers, but they could speak the way they want.
Like opposition.
Like opposition. And the other government, which was for the late Hayati Kibaki, his team could also speak differently, as if they were manning two different governments.
Okay.
So generally, I think it's about communication, and I think there's something which must have not been put in place.
Okay.
But we wait to hear from the relevant people so that he gives us the information.
Okay, 2 minutes. What do you make of it? And we have seen this is the second time now he's being suspended from an official position.
Well, let's start from this. That IBC is a career graveyard. It's proved that for so many people. That electoral body, the electoral management body, the EMB, whether it was IEBC, there's Isan Hasak, whom you never hear about, a very brilliant young man, disappeared. He even did his book, you don't talk about it. There are a lot of people who have gone through that particular bit of it. And that is why, for example, today IBC struggles to get quality people applying for jobs. It can no longer attract talent, because once you go to that particular end, it's a career graveyard, you don't survive. But then for Chiloba, I think there's a report that is already outside. There's a report from the committee upon which the board used to take that particular decision. They are actually accusing him of a conflict of interest on they have got a mortgage scheme. The Communication Authority has got a mortgage scheme. So they're talking about conflict of interest. Apparently he took a facility to buy something and he bought from himself. Then of course he exceeding the limit when you are using that particular facility. I think he took 7 acres, something to an argument that it should be 1 acre. Number 3, he lack of due diligence. Wasn't worked out very well. Then the mortgage, apparently he used a junior officer to approve it. It's him who was taking the facility, and it's a junior officer. He did not subject it to a higher authority to review and everything around that. So there is that. But then there is the political side of it. Even though it's important for us to say this, just because you have got something running after you, we should not then treat you like an egg when you make the next mistake. So it could be a mix-up of so many things. But unfortunately for him, he has got the IBC tag. We know that IBC has not been good for those who got to the apex. I think only Chebukati has come out to enjoy his retirement. Any other person who's come from IBC on retirement, it's either been hounded out and no one takes you in, which is a sad thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. That is Dr. Isaac Hassan, a political governance expert, and to his immediate right is Arnold Maliba, a public policy analyst. And of course, we'll have more in our subsequent bulletins. We also do understand that the principal secretary in the Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy, that is Professor Kisiangani, will be issuing a statement in regards to what happened at the Communication Authority. That ends our conversation this particular morning and afternoon as well. We were conversing about the issue of the cost of living. Let me just read one comment so that we can sign out. Somebody here, man on a mission on Twitter, clearly states that much more, to those who much more is given, much more is expected. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. Our sign language interpreter has been Lensa Odingo. Good afternoon for now.